I have to admit that as a priest, as a preacher, you get on these cycle of readings, like going through ordinary time, Mark's gospel in particular, going through the different chapters and different verses and such, and reading it in sequence. You kind of follow some themes week from week from week. And then to have suddenly a feast thrown in, so it can be a little bit more difficult. Plus, this is the feast of the birth of St. John the Baptist. It's not like it's a miracle or a parable of Jesus, so it's a little bit more difficult as well to kind of sometimes to come up with something to say, except for to say, happy birthday to John the Baptist. We should all have cake after Mass, but we'll try to do our best. This also is the patron of our parish, John the Baptist. The statue up here is the one who watches over us and looks after us. I always think every time I look at the statue, that's a kind of a cleaned up version of John the Baptist. I think he was probably a little bit more rough-hewn. He ate locusts, for goodness sake, and honey, and he wore camel's hair and such, and lived in the wilderness and in the desert, and so he probably was not that clean, but he certainly is our patron and one we watch over. In the Gospel of Luke, the early chapters 1 and chapter 2, there's a story of the birth of two children. One, obviously, we know very well, this birth of Jesus in the Nativity, which we celebrate at Christmas. And the second is that one that we celebrate here today, St. John the Baptist. And there's lots of similarities between the birth of these children. You think of the birth of Jesus, and that's a story that most of us know pretty well. We know the story of the angel Gabriel coming to Mary and the shepherds and all those different things, those images from Christmas. But the announcement and the story leading up to the birth of John the Baptist is not necessarily as well known. And so this gives us an opportunity to kind of look at some of the intricacies of that and to see what the author Luke and the Lord is saying to us through this particular story. John the Baptist's parents were an elderly couple named Zechariah and Elizabeth. Zechariah was a priest of the Lord, and he was in the temple of the Lord offering his sacrifice and incense for that particular month, as was his allotted time. And as he is in the temple offering this, at the altar there appears the angel Gabriel and says, "You and your wife are going to have a child." Now, that's joyous news, but Zechariah was a bit confused for a couple of reasons. One was that, why are you telling me this now, first of all? And secondly, that this is going to be kind of difficult considering that Elizabeth, my wife, and myself are in our 80s. That's a little bit different. A friend of mine and a parishioner of mine, when I was still in Mason City, Iowa, I said this to her. She was in her 80s. I said, "What would you do if the angel of the Lord came to you and told you were going to have a child?" And she says, "Father, I would run for the hills. There's no way." Every time I tell that story, every woman over 50 goes, "That's absolutely right. It's just what we would do." So that's the miracle. That is the miracle here in and of itself, is that Elizabeth, who had never had children before, suddenly was going to find herself with a child. She was overjoyed. And Zechariah, because he had questioned the Lord, was also, in a sense, kind of struck mute. His tongue was tied. He was not able to speak any longer because of his disobedience and questioning of the angel Gabriel. So we pick up the story here today where Elizabeth has her child, John the Baptist, and as they are getting ready to publicly present the child on the 8th day, all of the relatives and the neighbors and the friends come around and they say, "Well, you're going to name him Zechariah." They sound kind of nosy, don't they? But you're going to name him Zechariah. And Elizabeth says, "No, John will be his name. But none of your relatives have that name." It was the custom in that day that the first male child was always named after the father. And so they turn to Zechariah and they say, "What do you want? Do you want his name to be John, or should it be Zechariah?" And as he asks for a tablet, and he's mute, and he scribbles out, "John is his name." And with that act of obedience, because it's exactly what the angel Gabriel said that he should do, "You will name him John." With that act of obedience, Zechariah's tongue is freed, and he speaks, proclaiming the Lord. Now, John the Baptist, we know from other parts of the gospel, he is the forerunner to the Christ. He's the one who points us towards Jesus. He's the one who baptizes Jesus in the Jordan River. When some people come to him and said, "Are you the one who we are waiting to come into the world? Are you the Messiah?" John the Baptist could have been like, I kind of like this acclamation and this praise and all that. He could have said, "Sure," and been a false prophet. But he didn't. He had the courage and the conviction to say, "I'm not the one you're looking for. That one is coming later, and I am not worthy to untie the sandals of his feet." So he is the example that we are to have as well, always pointing towards Christ. That everything that we do is meant to point towards Jesus. That's the image and the responsibility and the witness that John the Baptist gave to us. And so we celebrate his birth because he is the forerunner to the Christ. He has a special place in salvation history. He is one of the first disciples, the one to recognize and say, "This is the one you are to follow." He's also the patron of our parish, and we pray for his intercession in a very, very special way. It is all, I think, beautiful that because it is the patron of our parish that we celebrate today, they may also welcome this child to receive communion for the first time. Are you excited? Kinda, yeah, she is. She's excited. We are excited for you as well. It's always a joy for us to share the Eucharist, especially with guests and visitors, and for someone for the first time, that brings joy to my heart. And I can say on behalf of all of the parishioners, it brings joy to their hearts as well.